Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Ever wonder how dictators actually turn a whole country, like their own personal empire? It's more than just having an army, right?
Right.
It's about the machinery of government itself.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into the chillingly effective methods of two very different dictators, Hitler and Castro.
Okay.
You'll learn how they seized control of the civil service, turning those bureaucrats and systems into instruments of their power.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to just focus on the dictator, their personality.
Yeah.
But the real story often lies in the shadows of those bureaucratic systems.
Right.
Both Hitler and Castro, they understood that to truly command a nation, you need to control the gears of government.
So let's start with Hitler in 1930s Germany. He inherited a civil service that wasn't exactly a fan of the democratic Weimar Republic, right?
You're hitting on a crucial point there. Many German civil servants at the time were deeply conservative. They were yearning for the perceived order of the Kaiser's era. They viewed the Weimar Republic as chaotic, weak, a betrayal of traditional German values.
So they were almost primed for someone like Hitler to step in and set things right.
Precisely. Hitler capitalized on this existing discontent, portraying himself as the savior of German tradition and strength.
Okay.
Many civil servants saw him as a return to greatness, someone who would restore their vision of a powerful and orderly Germany.
But Hitler, being Hitler, wasn't going to leave anything to chance, was he?
Absolutely not. He might have had some initial support, but he understood the importance of total control.
Right.
That's where Gleichschaltung comes in. It's a chillingly bureaucratic term for a chillingly effective process.
I've heard the term, but break it down for us.
Yeah.
What did it actually look like in practice?
Imagine a system where every single part, every cog in the machine, is forced to operate in perfect unison.
Okay.
No dissent, no deviation. That was Hitler's vision.
Wow.
And he used Gleichschaltung to ruthlessly impose it on German society, including the civil service.
So how did he do that?
He started by passing the law for the restoration of the professional civil service in 1933.
Okay, so this law was basically a blank check for him to reshape the bureaucracy in his image.
Essentially, yes. It gave him the legal authority to purge anyone deemed an enemy of the state from the civil service.
Wow.
We're talking about thousands of people, Jewish civil servants, those suspected of communist sympathies, anyone who dared to voice opposition. They were systematically removed, stripped of their livelihoods, and often subjected to further persecution.
It's hard to even imagine the fear and uncertainty of showing up to work every day, knowing that your colleagues could be gone tomorrow, replaced by someone who pledged allegiance to the Nazi Party.
And that climate of fear was incredibly effective. Imagine being a mid-level bureaucrat in the Ministry of Education or the Finance Ministry. You see your colleagues disappear. You know what fate could befall you.
Yeah.
So what do?
Right.
You fall in line. You keep your head down and you follow the party line, even if it means compromising your values.
So it wasn't just about removing those deemed disloyal, but also about creating a culture of self-censorship and unquestioning obedience within the civil service itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to further tighten his grip on power, Hitler went beyond the civil service. He targeted the legal system itself.
Oh, wow.
Demanding that thousands of lawyers swear loyalty oaths directly to him, not to the Constitution or the rule of law.
So even if someone managed to navigate the bureaucracy and challenge the regime, the courts were effectively stacked against them.
You got it. This ensured that the legal system, which is meant to be a check on power, became another tool for the Nazi regime to consolidate its control.
So Hitler, in a very calculated and systematic way, used laws and purges to turn the very system meant to serve the people into an instrument of his totalitarian rule.
Absolutely. He played on existing fears and prejudices, appealed to a longing for order, and then ruthlessly exploited the machinery of government to enforce his will.
Wow.
Castro's clean slate was essentially a two-pronged approach. First, he launched a sweeping purge of Batista loyalists from every level of government. We're talking about anyone and everyone associated with the old regime, high-ranking officials, military officers, even low-level bureaucrats who were seen as complicit in Batista's corrupt system.
So similar to Hitler, he eliminates those he perceives as a threat, but driven by a different motivation.
Right.
Hitler seeking to silence dissent. Castro, driven by this almost righteous fury against what he saw as a corrupt system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where the second part of his approach comes in.
Okay.
Having created this vacuum by removing thousands of people,
Right.
he needed to fill those positions with individuals who were not just loyal, but also ideologically aligned with his revolutionary vision.
So out with the corrupt officials, in with the revolutionaries.
Yes.
But how do you even begin to rebuild a functioning government
Right.
in that kind of chaotic environment?
This is where Castro's background as a revolutionary leader really comes into play.
Okay.
Remember, this wasn't just a political coup. It was a social revolution.
Right.
Castro drew upon the networks he had cultivated during the revolution,
Okay.
appointing trusted comrades and fellow revolutionaries to key positions within the government.
So these were people who had proven their loyalty, their dedication to his cause,
Yes.
often through years of struggle and sacrifice.
Exactly.
These weren't just bureaucrats.
Right.
They were true believers.
They were.
They were willing to work tirelessly, often for little to no pay, to build Castro's vision of a socialist Cuba. They saw themselves as servants of the people,
Yes.
tasked with eradicating corruption and inequality.
Right.
You can see how that kind of environment,
Yes.
that sense of shared purpose,
Yeah.
could be incredibly powerful, but it also sets the stage for potential problems down the line, doesn't it?
It does.
What happens when you prioritize ideological purity and revolutionary zeal over experience and expertise?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
And it's one that plagued Castro's government throughout its history.
Really?
While his revolution succeeded in sweeping away the old guard, building a new system from scratch proved to be a daunting task.
Wow.
One of the key challenges was a lack of qualified personnel.
Really?
Many of the experienced civil servants,
Okay.
even those who weren't directly tied to Batista, had fled the country after the revolution, fearing for their safety or simply disagreeing with Castro's ideology.
So you had this exodus of expertise,
Yes.
leaving a void that was difficult to fill.
Precisely. And this had a real impact on the functioning of the government.
How so?
There were shortages of essential goods, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and a real struggle to deliver on the promises of the revolution.
So in a way, Castro's revolution devoured its own children.
Yeah.
The very people who helped him seize power often lacked the skills and experience to effectively govern.
And to complicate matters further,
Yeah.
Castro also had to contend with the enduring power of the bureaucracy itself.
Oh, interesting.
Even with new people in place, the old ways of doing things,
Right?
the ingrained habits of corruption and inefficiency were hard to shake off.
So it's not as simple as just changing the faces at the top.
No.
The bureaucracy itself has its own inertia,
Right.
its own resistance to change.
Exactly.
Right.
And this is where we start to see both the strengths and limitations of Castro's approach.
Yeah.
On the one hand, his revolutionary zeal and his commitment to building a new system allowed him to make radical changes that would have been unthinkable under the old regime.
Right.
But on the other hand, his reliance on loyalty over expertise, combined with the inherent challenges of reshaping a deeply entrenched bureaucracy,
Yeah.
created a whole new set of problems.
It's fascinating to see how both Hitler and Castro,
Yes.
despite their vastly different backgrounds and ideologies,
Right.
faced a similar challenge: how to bend the machinery of government to their will.
And it's a challenge that dictators throughout history have grappled with. How do you balance the need for control with the need for competence?
Right.
How do you ensure loyalty without sacrificing efficiency?
It's a delicate balancing act,
It is.
and one that often has profound consequences
Yes.
for the people caught in the middle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something that historians continue to debate to this day.
Really?
There are those who argue that a certain degree of ruthlessness is necessary to break the back of a corrupt or inefficient bureaucracy.
A necessary evil, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then there are those who argue that such methods, even with the best of intentions,
Right?
often lead to new forms of oppression and dysfunction.
It's a debate with, no easy answers, right?
Right?
It's the age-old question of whether the ends justify the means, especially when it comes to something as complex and far-reaching as, reshaping a nation's bureaucracy.
Precisely. And it's a debate that takes on even greater significance when we consider the long-term impact of these dictators' actions.
Right.
Because it wasn't just about what they did while in power. It
Well.
was about the legacy they left behind.
So let's talk about those legacies, starting with Hitler. His attempt to create a perfectly controlled state, a totalitarian machine with himself at the helm, ultimately collapsed with the Third Reich.
Right.
Yes, but the damage was already done. Hitler's reign might have been relatively short-lived in the grand scheme of history.
Right.
But his systematic dismantling of democratic institutions and his manipulation of the civil service had a devastating impact on Germany.
You had this entire generation of Germans, many of whom had grown up under the Weimar Republic, who were either seduced by Nazi ideology, terrorized into submission, or simply disillusioned by the chaos of the pre-Hitler years.
And that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just about the physical structures of government, it was about the culture of governance itself. Hitler instilled a deep distrust of democracy.
Wow.
A belief that strongman rule was the only way to ensure order and stability.
A poisonous legacy that took Germany decades to overcome.
Absolutely. And even then, the scars of that period continue to shape German society and politics to this day.
And what about Castro's Cuba? His revolution, fueled by the promise of equality and an end to corruption, ultimately created a new kind of authoritarian state.
One that, for all its flaws and contradictions, has proven to be remarkably resilient. Castro's Cuba is a fascinating case study in the challenges of building a new society from the ashes of the old.
Because you can't deny the achievements of the Cuban Revolution, especially in areas like healthcare and education. But those achievements came at a steep price, didn't they?
Indeed. Political repression, economic stagnation, and a deep-seated suspicion of dissent became hallmarks of Castro's rule.
Yeah.
And while he might have genuinely believed he was acting in the best interests of the Cuban people, his methods ultimately undermined the very ideals he claimed to champion. So, as we try to untangle this web of historical forces and motivations, what can our listener take away from these two very different dictators who, in their own ways, mastered the art of bureaucratic control?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the machinery of government is a double-edged sword. In the hands of a benevolent leader, a well-functioning bureaucracy can be a powerful force for good,
Right.
delivering essential services, upholding the rule of law, and ensuring a basic standard of living for all citizens. But in the hands of a dictator, those same systems can be twisted and contorted, transformed into instruments of oppression and control.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that vigilance is the price of freedom. It's up to each and every one of us to understand how power operates,
Right.
how those positions of authority might seek to manipulate the systems we rely on, and to hold them accountable when they abuse that power.
Because whether it's Hitler's Germany, Castro's Cuba, or any other society grappling with the complexities of power, the machinery of government is a tool that can be used for good or for evil. And understanding how it works, understanding the levers and pressure points, is essential for anyone who aspires to be an informed and engaged citizen.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this thought-provoking deep dive. It's one that will stay with me, and I suspect with our listeners, for quite some time. Until next time, keep those critical thinking caps on, and remember, knowledge is power.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.